Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk and welcome back to the 16th Slimekeep Devlog. In this devlog, I made 2 new slimes for the game along with a bunch of small changes, so let's get into it. The first thing I worked on was giving the player a death animation. Thankfully this was pretty easy as Falcon Strike made some really nice animations, so I imported those and set them up, and now the player has a death animation, which I think looks really nice. I also imported this chest idle animation made by Toasted Toast, which I think makes the chest look so much better, so thanks to everyone who made art for the game. Next up, I made a small change to the slimes by giving them a random time between moves. This made it so that when slimes spawn in a room, they won't all jump at the exact same time, there's a random delay between them, which is a pretty nice improvement in my opinion. It makes things look a bit more natural. Next, I made some changes to the minimap by making the pixel size more consistent with the hearts in the upper right corner, and I also worked a bit on the post-processing effects to make them look a little more natural. I still have to do some work on the weapons UI, but at least the minimap looks a bit better now. After making all those changes, I was really unsure what to work on, so I checked my Trello board and I remembered that I wanted to eventually add melee weapons to the game, so I spent a few days attempting to create a melee weapon system. However, I quickly realized that this wouldn't be as easy as I thought. The reason for this was that I realized that with my current weapon system, I don't think there's a way to switch between weapons that use different scripts or scriptable objects. And I didn't want to have to pack the whole entire melee weapons logic into the same script that handled ranged weapons. I thought over multiple possible solutions, but at the end of the day, I just couldn't think of an efficient way to implement this, so after some contemplation, I decided to stop working on it for now. However, I didn't want to leave the melee weapon system idea in the dust. So in my game doc, I drafted out an idea for a melee weapons mode which can possibly be unlocked at some point later in the game, where the player could select between a pistol and a basic sword at the start of a run. And if the player chose the sword, he could only use and purchase melee weapons for that run. And the same goes with the ranged weapons. I thought this could be a potentially neat idea, but it would add to the workload of the game, and I probably wouldn't work on it for a long time, but let me know what you think. Next up, I emailed Andre about the Fog of War effect as I got a lot of feedback on it. He made some really awesome changes to the asset, so now the Fog of War was much more customizable. I then made some changes to the Fog of War that still weren't final, but I thought it was at least looking a bit better now. Another issue with the Fog of War was that the trigger was kind of off, and triggered too early. And I couldn't just move the trigger because I didn't count for the player entering rooms from either side of the corridor. So I worked on some logic that was very similar to my door respawning logic, and now the fog would only trigger when the player was fully in the room, and there are a few exceptions, and sometimes the fog trigger is a bit off in some corridors, but I think this was good for now. After that, I was quite lost on what to work on. By now, the game had a lot of the mechanics and foundation set up, but the game still wasn't really playable. So I thought of what the game needed to get closer to being playable, and I decided that I simply needed to work on more substance for the game. And by substance, I mean slimes, weapons, and upgrades, as I feel like I have all these mechanics set up, but not enough input into these mechanics to make the game feel playable, if that makes any sense. So I added some of the old slimes we haven't seen for a while back into the scene, just temporarily, and I started working on the first new slime for the game. And believe it or not, this is the first time I've added a slime to the game for a whole 7 months. I just find this kind of crazy that Slimekeep has been going on for this long, so thank you everyone for your continued support. Anyways, someone in my Discord server made this really awesome wizard slime concept that inspired me to add a wizard slime into the game. I still don't know who originally made this, so if you did, please let me know, but besides that, I started downscaling this original wizard slime into smaller forms. After that, I had 3 different wizard slimes, which you can see right here. I considered making even larger forms, but I considered that the wizard slime's current biggest form was already big enough, so I kind of concluded that the wizard slime would only have 3 stages. Also, I decided that this wizard slime would have 2 different types of abilities. The first would be a teleport, in which the wizard slime would randomly teleport to a random location inside of the current room. The other ability would be a projectile attack, where the wizard would shoot out various projectiles from his staff. And the wizard slime would randomly choose between each of these abilities with a 50-50 chance. So I made 3 different projectiles that the wizard slime would shoot from his staff. After setting up a bit of the logic behind the wizard slime, he could now randomly teleport around the room. There were still some instances where you would occasionally teleport inside of walls, but I didn't really think that was going to be too big of an issue to fix. Next up, I worked on setting up the attack logic and animations. I also had to crop every wizard slime so that the flipping looked natural, so that was kind of annoying. But after quite a bit of time and labor, the slime can now flip naturally, and he also had a very basic attack setup, which is pretty much the same shooting logic as the projectile slime. Though, as you can see, the shooting and teleporting was still a bit buggy overall. So I decided to fix the teleporting issue where the slime would teleport inside of walls, and oh boy, was I in for a ride. After a lot of debugging, I realized that part of the issue was that my current room variable was incorrect, and occasionally the slime would start teleporting around in a different room. though I still had absolutely no clue why this is happening, and it only seemed to happen when the player entered the room from the top, which just made no sense. So I proceeded to spend absolutely forever debugging this issue and trying to figure out where it's coming from. I messed around with the corridors, debugged the scripts, and so much more, all to no success. I ended up emailing Andre about the issue, and he gave a bit of advice for debugging, and eventually I found the problem. It was that when my player rubbed against the bottom wall in a room, the game would think that the players left that room. However, this didn't work with any of the other walls, so I concluded that this was because my player collider left the floor trigger of the room, because I had set up the rooms without the floor tiles under the wall tiles, because when I had floor tiles under the wall tiles, it would cause some issues with the doors closing too early, and just some weird stuff. So Andre suggested that I move my room detection code to a different function, which would allow me to add floor tiles under the wall tiles. So that's what I decided to do, and what this did was make sure that players fully left the corridor before entering a new room, instead of the old way of detecting when a player enters the room. Thankfully, this mostly fixed the issue, and now the player could rub against the bottom wall all he wanted, and it would not detect him leaving the room. This also required me to move all my fog of war triggers kind of far away from the corridors, so this does feel a bit strange, but I don't think it's too big of an issue. You might have also noticed that the minimap walls weren't rendering because of these changes. I later fixed this, but I think this does look kinda cool, so let me know what you think, if you like this more than with walls. Anyways, I thought this would fix everything, though unfortunately it didn't, and I still had problems with the current room detection. But I won't bore you anymore, and as it turns out this whole time, all I needed to do was update my current room variable in the onRoomLeave function, along with the onRoomEnter function, which is something I wasn't doing before. And finally this fixed the issue, and the current room detection was now working. Now the wizard slime couldn't teleport outside of the room, however he could still teleport inside the collidable objects inside the room for some reason. This was another super confusing issue, but I'll spare you all the explaining. As it turns out, I need the collidable tile map layer to use the polygon's geometry type so that it can detect overlap circles inside of the collider. Finally, after what felt like forever, the wizard slime was finally almost done. It was quite a process to get this guy working, but I'm glad I tackled and learned about these issues now rather than later. But anyways, as you can see, the wizard slime can teleport around the map and occasionally shoot projectiles. In the first stage he'll shoot 1, in the second he'll shoot 3, and in the last stage he'll shoot 5. And I also made sure to add a bit of polish to the teleporting and shooting. Even though I wasn't completely done with the wizard slime, I moved on to another small piece of polish that I think improves the game quite a bit. This was making it so that the slime balls pop out of the ground when all the enemies are killed, rather than just sitting there after killing an enemy. After some work, I think this effect looks pretty nice. After killing all the enemies in a room, the slime balls fade in and pop out using tweening. And this is very similar to what I'm doing with the chest slime balls. I think this effect probably needs a bit more work, but let me know what you think. I then got back to work on this death animation, which is the inverse of the teleport effect, which looks pretty neat in my opinion. Also, someone made this teleport effect that I used, and I don't know who, so let me know if you did. I also feel like the wizard slime needed an indication of when he's about to teleport, so I created this animation where the wizard slime blinks his eyes and set that up in Unity. So now, before teleporting, the wizard slime will give an indication to the player. And with that said, after so many days of work, the wizard slime was finally done and almost completely glitchless, at least I hope. Now I could finally move on to working on another slime, and thankfully this slime didn't cause too many issues and probably took me 5 times less time to create. This slime is going to be the splitter slime. Pretty much, the splitter slime would be like a regular slime, but when he dies, a slime would split off him and run towards the player. I also don't know who made the original splitter slime concept, but Polar on my Discord server made some really nice and squishy jump animations, so I spent a bunch of time modifying these animations to fit the game a bit better and making some small changes. After that, I set up these animations in Logic and Unity, and after a few days of work, the splitter slime was already looking okay, though I wasn't really satisfied with its jump. So I spent some more time making tweaks to the animations and values, and after that, the splitter slime was looking much better in my opinion. I also created these death animations where the splitter slime shrinks down and the mini slime leaps off, which I think looks kind of cool. Though for now, the mini slimes didn't have any logic behind them, so that's what I got to working on. I created these squishy animations for the slimes and set them up, and all I really did was just make them so they follow the player. Then I got them to spawn when the splitter slime dies, and boom, the splitter slime was mostly done. I think this guy is pretty cool. He also only has 3 stages, but I still think that's enough stages for this guy, probably. And I'm not completely finished with this slime yet, but I was just getting kind of tired of working, so I left him there. Anyways, that's going to be the end of this video. Unfortunately, some things took a really long time to figure out these past weeks, and keep in mind that time spent working doesn't always correlate with progress, but in the end, I'm still happy I figured things out. Also, thanks for sticking around this long, and if you like this video, please consider giving it a like or hitting that subscribe button, it means a lot. Also, thank you for 15,000 subscribers and all the support on my recent videos. That's all I have to say for now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.